The idea, insight, or secret you need for massive impact is just moments away. It's time to claim your career crown. The podcast where business owners and entrepreneurs share the keys to the kingdom to help you open the vault to your greater success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Petite to Queen's Claim Your Career Crown podcast. I'm your host, Lynn, and today I'm joined by our special guest and returning guest, Claire E. Jones. And we're going to be talking about making fantasy a reality, how to find success as a self-published author. Now, many of you may have a book niggling in the back of your mind, and today you're going to learn how to make it a reality. And if you get a ton of value out of this episode, I'd love to invite you to subscribe because it costs nothing to subscribe. Now, Claire is a queer fantasy romance author, as well as an experienced guide who supports other writers in getting their works into the world. As an internationally recognized speaker and writer, her novels have sold in 6 countries, been picked up by bookstores across the U.S., and ranked in the top 100 of Ingram Fiction Fantasy Romance category, in the Ingram Fiction Fantasy Romance category. Oh, wow. Trying to get that all out, Claire.
I know. I've got it memorized at this point.
So, Claire, I'm so thrilled to have you back. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, so glad to be here. It's been a while since I've been on. I was trying to remember when exactly that was.
That was in a different incarnation. You were just starting to really lean into your writing. So I have to say, because of that, we'd love to hear the backstory of what inspired you to really shift and go full on into your writing.
I mean, it was honestly an existential crisis. As it happens sometimes. You know, I've been a creative since birth. My mom was an art teacher for 25 years. And so I joke that every bone in my body is a creative bone in some shape or form. And I've been writing since I was 7 years old. It was so funny when I started this publishing business back in 2022. My mom actually sent me a box of books that I had written when I was a kid. And it's very simple stuff, like the dog and the cat went to the park and they had fun, like that kind of stuff. But over the years, writing has really been my preferred mode of self-expression, but it was a skill that underlined all of my other skill sets. Like, it's why I was so good in school. It's why I was able to pursue. I went from, in high school, I won awards for poetry. But even then, people weren't like, maybe you should think about this as a career option. And so I went into art history as my college career. And when you are an art historian, you're trained to be a lecturist and kind of article writer. And so then I got published in peer-reviewed journals for my papers that I was writing and stuff like that. And even then, people weren't like, this is something that you should consider doing for your life. But I just took a hard right into business and entrepreneurship after that and did a whole lot of business writing for 6, 7, 8 years and got to the point where I realized I wasn't really fulfilling my creative spark with the business stuff. I was like, my soul is kind of low-key dying. And so I rediscovered my love of specifically fantasy and romance. Those are the genres that I've always been a huge consumer of over the years. And I just started reading voraciously. I think the numbers are, I read 20 books in 2021. And then in 2022, I read 120.
Wow.
And so reintroducing myself to that world of those genres and getting more familiar with it, I was like, maybe there's something here. And so I was like, I've never actually tried to write just straight up fiction. I've tried pretty much every genre out there except for fiction up until that point in my life. So I was like, what if I just try? Because worst case scenario, I can delete the document and no one has to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But within 4 months, I had a manuscript, a 90,000 word fantasy romance manuscript fully fleshed out. And so that was kind of the spark for really committing to this path as a publisher and writer.
Well, that is amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because it's a great background story of sort of the path you took to get to where you are now. And I would love to have you tell, how do you help writers, both published and unpublished, get their books into the hands of readers?
Yeah, well, since I have such a strong business background, that's actually something that many authors and writers do not have. And so I joke that I speak both creative and business. I can translate between the two very easily. And so normally when people are embarking on their author writing career, they don't have those backup business skills already in hand. They don't know how it is to sell a product to market, or even project manage the creation of a product, and like how to hire a team, and like how to create timeline deliverables, and all of the more organizational, logistical, structure oriented stuff that I learned doing business and entrepreneurship. And I kind of have a systems brain anyway. I love me a color coded spreadsheet. And so when I'm working with other writers, I basically read whatever they have. If it's published or unpublished, doesn't really matter. I read it. And then I see where the gaps are. Like, does it need more editing? Does it need formatting? Does it just need a marketing plan? Do you just need the author website, the lead magnet set up? And so we figure out what pieces are missing, and I help them fill those gaps.
Well, it sounds like you have a very set process. What you're talking about is sort of that starting point of reading their work and then determining what they need to do to become more successful as either, if they're not published yet, or if they are published, so that they can get their books into more hands, and ultimately sell more books. Is that correct?
Yeah. I work with a lot of already published authors who are just not selling at the rate that they want to be selling. And so we first look at the book to see how marketable it actually is. And more often than not, I actually recommend that they update the book that they have, because a lot of people are very eager to hit that self-publish button on Amazon, particularly. And they might skip a lot of quality control steps leading up to that point. And so more often than not, I have them go back, polish up the manuscript, republish it so that it is as marketable as possible later on. But if the product is already great, already marketable, then we just need to set up a good marketing strategy for them.
Yeah, so that process of helping the authors really put together a plan to sell more books, what does that look like?
It honestly depends on their goal, because everyone's goal is different. I always ask them what their version of success looks like, because for some people it means New York Times bestseller. For other people, it means I just want to do readings in my local bookstore. Other people want to just have copies that they can give to their children for legacy's sake. And so the structures and the strategies that you use to physically deliver and distribute your book and sell your book into the world is going to depend heavily on what the goal is. If your goal is to get into bookstores, become a New York Times bestseller, you're going to have to use certain publishing platforms and certain marketing strategies that may or may not be applicable to the person who just wants to get books into the hands of their children. So I always look at word of mouth first and foremost for marketing strategies. That is the king and queen when it comes to marketing, right? So how can we generate more word of mouth? And then I actually use a lot of press ad strategies, more so than social media ads and that kind of stuff, more like press collaborations and newsletter collaborations, pretty much speaking to your target audience in a very intentional and strategic way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's brilliant, because that's one way to, once again, get exposure to your books. And I'm sure there's a huge gap between people who want a legacy for their family and people who want to be on the New York Times bestseller list, because there's a whole lot of in between.
Yeah.
And you can have a very lucrative career and never be on the New York Times bestseller list, but you have a a following of devoted readers who are waiting for your next book to be published.
Yeah.
So I'd love to have you talk about sort of that space. And because that, I love the fact that you've really started with what's their goal.
Yeah.
What do they want to achieve? Because the tactics and strategy used are going to be wildly different.
Exactly.
And so if you're looking to really build their readers and their raving fans, what does that look like?
Yeah, I call them their cheerleaders, like your vibe is your tribe, right? And that's something I recently did some panel conversations at the San Francisco Writers Conference at the beginning of February. And I kept having to remind people that I was consulting with that it's supposed to be fun. Like you're supposed to be having fun connecting with your audiences. Like marketing isn't a necessary evil. Yeah. It's like you get to have fun with it because you are hopefully connecting with people who get you, like people who speak your language, people who get your vibe and love your vibe. And so really at the end of the day, what you want to do is create visibility for yourself, which happens either in person or online spaces. There are 1,000 ways to do it. I always recommend starting with the spaces that will give you the potential for the highest conversion rates, which means starting with the spaces that have the highest value alignment and topic alignment. Like if you're writing a book about the migratory patterns of North American birds, you may or may not do well at a fantasy sci-fi Comic-Con.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Right? And so you have to think about visibility events, visibility opportunities that align either value-wise, topic-wise, vibe-wise. Start with those. And then once you create that visibility, once you get those interested eyes, you need to bring those interested eyes into your own personal community. So those are the people that are going to be your cheerleaders. That's your tribe. And so you are going to get the highest conversion rate, the highest sales rate and alignment rate within your own community. And that can be in person or online too. Discord servers, Facebook groups, book clubs, it doesn't matter where you gather them, but just gathering them around you is the important part.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so true for any kind of sales. It's you've got to go where your ideal clients hang out.
Yeah.
You have to first identify who your ideal clients are, really understand that. So then you can go to where they hang out. Now, and I know that there's a couple of strategies that are really effective for authors, such as using things like book funnel, which you don't have to give a whole book away. It can be either, part of a book or something else, or doing guest podcasting. And once again, if you're doing a book on the migratory birds or whatever you said,
it's one of my examples.
There are websites that talk about nature, that talk about birds, that talk about the environment. Those would be podcasts and a lot of interview podcasts that you could get onto to talk about your book.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So
I talk to a lot of people about social media because that's usually the question that people ask me first. They're like, how do I go viral on social media? That's the question that I get all the time. And I'm like, all right, first off, that's the wrong question to ask. Yeah. Second off, I will tell you how. And once it happens, you will not like it. I promise you.
Yeah.
Because people are thinking that it's a quantity game, not a quality game.
Yeah.
Because what we are talking about here when it comes to finding the events that align with you and your books, that's a quality issue.
Yeah.
But when you're looking to go viral online, that's sheer quantity numbers. And 9 times out of 10, that vast audience that you reach by going viral is going to be 99.999% of people that you don't actually want to reach.
Right. I mean, it's so true. You could speak to a group of 100 and you'd get 90 new raving fans. You could speak to a room of 10,000, you'd have 9.
Yeah.
So it's always about the alignment, as you had said. So, as we sort of shift gears here, self-publishing is a thing that has become much more in the mainstream. I mean, and you do hear about people who have huge successes with it. I mean, the Martian, right? Is a classic. But I'd love to hear about that process of self-publishing and why it can be such a challenge. I mean, where, once again, there are gaps and there's hidden risk factors that you have to take into account. Could you share some about that?
Yeah, it's because I think the market is oversaturated with options for people who want to self-publish, and especially for people who like don't know what their goal is in
Yeah.
self-publishing, because that's going to be your compass for making the decisions between all the options available to you. So you can go the just KDP Amazon self-publish route very easily. A lot of people go that way, and it's a very easy route to take, but there's are a lot of stipulations and caveats and limitations related with that.
Right.
I've run into so many Amazon authors who later come to me and they're like, "How do I get my book into Target and Walmart?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, you won't."
Write
Because
a new book.
well, it's possible to republish it on a
Right.
different platform. That is definitely something that they can look into, but third-party retailers do not wholesale from Amazon. And so
Right.
you are not going to be able to get your book into third-party retailers if you publish exclusively through Amazon. And so when you are starting this process, again, you have to think about, what are my goals? Do I just want the book printed? Go with a local printer. Do I want the book just on Amazon? Go free, go with Amazon. It's fine. Do you want wide distribution, bookstores, third-party retailers? Then you're probably going to have to go with Ingram Spark. All of those options, you have to do it all yourself. So you are the one responsible for uploading the files. You are the one responsible for creating the metadata, the blurbs, the QR codes, the ISBNs, all of that stuff. So the fourth option is hiring someone else to do all that for you. And so there are a lot of options for that out there as well. There's things called vanity presses, which means you're basically publishing under their imprint and they own the rights to your work, but they handle all the work for you when it comes to publishing. There's also such thing as hybrid publishing, where you pay a company to do the work for you, but you may or may not retain the rights yourself for some defined amount of time, depending on what the contract is. And then there's also small presses, which are kind of like the traditional published framework, but on a smaller scale than like the big five publishers. So there are a lot of options out there. I know that I just skimmed through them very quickly.
Yes.
I have like a whole self-publishing 101 talk that I do where I'm like, all right, this is this, this is this, this is this. But again, just start with what your goal is and what level of work you're willing to do yourself as well. I think that's the other consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even if you were able to get your work accepted by a mid-size or larger publication house, first of all, there's often a longer timeline or runway, but you're going to be expected to do a lot of promotion for that book.
You still have to do all your own marketing.
Yeah.
Unless you pay someone else to do it. Some hybrid presses and vanity presses will offer like a marketing add-on where you can like pay an extra $3,000 to have someone else do the marketing for you. But 9 times out of 10, you have to do your own marketing no matter which way you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's interesting because I love that you talk about that publishing 101, because there are a lot of blind spots. People might think I have to go with a big publisher that, Random House or what have you.
Sure.
But then like Ingram has a normal publishing house. I mean, that's where they came from, but they also have the self-publishing arm, and you can get your books manufactured there.
Yeah.
I remember doing a test back, 8 years ago with my first book, and from having Ingram publish it, print it, and Amazon print it. And I will say the Ingram books were a better quality, just a little bit better edge. Now, it wasn't huge, okay, but it was discernible. But I come from a printing background, okay, and I can guarantee you that that's the best way to have them manufactured. Then go to your local printer. Don't do that. But that blind spot is, I think it's, from what we've been talking about, it's tied to the goal.
Yes.
It's like, if you don't understand your goal and then understand where your ideal clients are going to hang out, which publisher you go with, that's going to could be quite different.
Yeah, exactly. Like I cannot tell you how many conversations I have with Amazon authors who are like, they're like, I'm published and I'm not doing what I want to do. And I'm like, it's because you went with Amazon, but I don't want to say that. Like, I'm often the bearer of bad news. And I often, surprisingly enough, talk people out of writing books because we get down to what their goal actually is. Yes. And I'm like, a book is not the correct vehicle for that goal.
Right.
or the most cost efficient, time efficient vehicle for that goal.
Right. Right.
A lot of people think that a book will bring them visibility when really it's the other way around. You have to have visibility in order to distribute the book.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm like, there are so many better ways to get visibility than spending the time, money, and effort to write a book.
Be a guest on a podcast. No.
That's what I tell people. I'm like, start with a podcast, go do that TED Talk, and then write the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what should listeners do next about finding success as a self-published author?
I mean, that's decide what your goal is.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Do your research too. Talk to people who have been published, and especially if you are considering the hybrid vanity press route, talk to people who have done it. Talk to people who have done it specifically with the companies that you are considering, because I have heard so many horror stories from people over the years when it comes to working with those. And there are some great companies out there who are in that space, but there are a lot who are not great.
and that's so true with every type of industry, right? I mean, the same with sales. I mean, there are so many just sales coaches or consultants, right? And they're just So that, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, there's always the good, the bad, and the ugly. So
Also,
but I think that's a great, also there's often local self-published or author groups and that you can look into in your own community, depending on, I'm in a very small community on Lopez Island. So, but even here we have self-published, we have authors or both published traditionally and self-published. But I joined an author group when I lived on the mainland, and that was really helpful because there were people who had been there, done that, some people who were making a living with their published work. And that had some really great just insights and connections that I was able to make, and sort of that learning curve.
And it doesn't have to be in person either. It can be online.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you can look beyond your local area. If you do live very isolated in rural areas, you may or may not be able to find in-person groups, or you just might not be able to find in-person groups that are your vibe too.
Right.
You know, and so there's such a plethora of options online these days on a whole range of platforms. Like my community, I originally found them on Book Talk. Like, I was so inspired by all the people that I was seeing on Book Talk, and I was like, I needed you when I was 10.
Now, I've not heard of Book Talk, so that's great.
Oh, man. Book Talk is a juggernaut in the publishing industry. The statistic that I always use is between June 2021 to June 2022, trending Book Talk titles increased in sales by over 1,200%.
Wow.
And so Book Talk these days makes or breaks. It's Book Talk, like as in TikTok.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of people get that wrong, especially if you're not in the world of TikTok. But it's makes or breaks authors' careers these days. It's why Colleen Hoover has become a household name. Colleen Hoover is one of those self-published authors that went viral and started just shooting through the charts because of the Book Talk communities. And so a lot of authors make and center their careers around Book Talk these days.
Cool.
And traditional publishers are mad about it.
Well, tough.
I know, because it's very hard to supply the demand that virality on Book Talk creates, because like out-of-date titles may go viral overnight on the platform, and then they're rushing to publish them and print them, and then the demand may disappear in like a week, you know? And so it's much more suited for self-publishing and indie publishing and print-on-demand frameworks when it comes to publishing, more so than the more traditional publishing models.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Claire, I have to ask, is there anything that you wished I had asked you?
Oh man. I could do these kind of podcasts for days at this point. That's why I've been speaking so much on a whole range of different stages lately. Like I've been doing a lot of conferences and cons talking about, just not only the self-publishing process, but the genres and like why fantasy in particular is suited for self-publishing platforms. And I even did one on like mental health and maintaining your mental health in self-publishing. So I could go on for days. You don't want to ask me that question.
Okay. For another time.
Yeah.
So Claire, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing making fantasy a reality, how to find success as a self-published author. I know that our listeners are going to want to know more about you and how they can connect and find you and find your work.
Yeah, Linktree/clairjoyance is where all of my links are. So feel free to peruse.
All right. We are going to make sure that link is provided so that everybody, Claire is just one click away and you can get her books. And Claire, thank you so much. And thank you everyone who tuned in today. This has been such an informative discussion for all of you who have that book waiting in the back of your mind, or even some words on paper. Let's first think about your goal. And then I want you to check in and tune in to Claire. And Claire, thank you again. This has been amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to talk about this stuff.
What was your biggest takeaway from this episode? I would love to hear about it. It's important to share the things you love. If you loved this episode, a 5-star review really helps keep the podcast coming to you regularly. Also, if you want to get more sales strategies to grow your business, make sure you subscribe right now. If you want to get results even faster, I invite you to download my sales strategy checklist at petitetoqueen.com/checklist. This has been Lynn Whitbeck, host of Claim Your Career Crown. I'll see you next time.